by asking questions like of yourself, doing research, like just exploring that more. That's part of the process for developing self-trust, which is necessary for valuing yourself enough to know that you can make decisions that are different from the default path, whatever you've been taught. That is something I've learned.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Welcome back to the Give a Heck podcast. I'm your host, Dwight Heck, here to help you live life on purpose and not by accident. If you haven't listened to part one of my conversation with Sira Laurel yet, I want to encourage you to start there first. What we built in that episode is the foundation for everything we're about to get into. But if you're joining us today for the first time, here is what you need to know. Sira is the founder of North of Normal. She spent 15 years inside demanding corporate HR leadership roles, carrying a highly sensitive nervous system through environments that were never designed for it before finally stepping away to build something of her own. In part one, we covered her origin story, what it actually means to be a highly sensitive person, why the traditional leadership model is failing a huge portion of the workforce, and how that failure is costing organizations far more than they realize. At the very end of part one, Sira started opening up the conversation about AI, and we ran out of time right at the moment it was getting most interesting. So today we're picking up exactly there and going somewhere I think the audience has genuinely been waiting for. What all this actually means in practice. How does sensitivity become a strategic advantage? What does psychological safety really look like when a leader builds it for real? What does AI have to do with any of this? And what is the honest step for someone ready to stop working against their own brain? Sira, welcome back to the Give a Heck podcast. Thanks for agreeing to come on and share with us more of your knowledge and understanding. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you so much. It's good to be back.
Yeah, good to be back. Our first episode, when I was going through and producing it and listening to it again, it was just like, wow. It's just, I want to say I'm impressed and proud of you to step outside of your comfort zone, especially with, the emotional and mental challenges that some of us go through. Some people would just cower. Would hide. They wouldn't want to put themselves out there, especially, when we're up for judgment, criticism, that old ad, when people say to us, what do you know? Like, so what? So you had a tough time, all the negative keyboard warriors that are out there. So thank you for being willing to put yourself out there and help so many other individuals so that they too can live a purposeful life. There's not a lot of us out there. So I like to be appreciative and show gratitude for those that are willing to step out on faith and take a chance for others. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. It is. I was talking with somebody earlier today about that, he is stepping outside of corporate America to take on his fractional solopreneur journey. And he had said the same thing. It's like, it's hard to find people who aren't motivated by, financial gravitational pull and actually want to serve humans. So yeah, building an intentional business, it can be hard because the signals are few and far between. But when you meet somebody who is on that same frequency, it feels good.
Oh, you can feel the vibration. I call it I get people that laugh at me though, especially with some of my coaching clients. I tell them I call it the warm and fuzzy.
Yeah,
right? I get when I connect with us, I can connect with a person and feel that warm and fuzzy. I can connect with a topic created by individuals or a group and get the same thing. But when I have a conversation with somebody where you truly resonate with them, it's such a joy. You go away feeling tapped in some ways emotionally and mentally, but in other ways you feel so satisfied, right? So
absolutely.
those listening and watching, one doesn't have to be false for the other to be true, or vice versa. So, you know, it's been great. Being an entrepreneur though is it's not an easy challenge, right? This is my third kick at being an entrepreneur. The other two were successful as well. But this one, 25 years in, I'm still constantly learning. So you're just at the start of your journey helping people. I can't imagine where you'll be 20 years in, because me throughout my journey did not have the same tools that somebody has today, right? So I'm excited. I think you'll be able to collapse time frames in a very quick fashion. And I honestly believe if you haven't thought about it or have done it, I think you'll be somebody that looks at speaking on national stages, because there's so many organizations that need to hear they need to hear more than just having a book or a document or a PowerPoint. They need somebody that's going to go up there, because our words mean one thing, our emotions and feelings with those words are really what's going to resonate and make people have that warm and fuzzy, like we're talking about with our conversation and connection. So I'm excited to continue to follow your journey even after our conversations. And throughout your growth, we can have you back on again and keep on, feeding the masses the information they deserve to hear, not the information that sells, right? Makes
Exactly.
money, right? So at the end of our last conversation, he started opening up about something I want to make sure we get proper room for today. So we will get into the AI stuff, but I've kind of want to develop it into a process and a flow that makes it so that people, really grasp this and understand what's going on. So as you mentioned, you talked with one of your friends about, their fractal journey, right? So you talk about fractal patterns, the idea of what happens at the individual level mirrors what happens at the team and the organizational level. And you connected that to what's going wrong as organizations rush to adopt AI. Take us into that. What are you actually seeing?
Well, we're doing, what we kind of tend to do and historically have done, which is over indexing on a new tool, right? On something exciting. And even, on a personal level, we can see that where you find something new and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to learn everything about this thing. And you just become super into whatever that thing is. And maybe it consumes you and you don't think about, the consequences of kind of hyper focus on a thing and the imbalance that comes from over indexing and getting like too involved in a thing without thinking about second, third order effects. But yeah, you extrapolate that onto this global scale, and AI is that shiny new thing that we're over indexing on without thought of consequence. That we are only, I think that there's a lot of distrust in the market right now. And I'm seeing at least more conversations now that we've been playing with AI for a few years around ethics and governance and, putting guardrails on the thing and like controlling the beast. Like we can do this a right way. But there are lots of gravitational forces, financial and hyper competitive forces that when we see, oh, other organization is doing it and they're leaping into AI and they're adopting it and people are posting things about how it's doing all this stuff for their organization, which again, as I talk to like people who are actually in those systems going like, we're not actually realizing the gains of this tool yet, that we are forgetting just how taxing that is to push something before we fully understand it, before we have accounted for the identity, beliefs, and emotions, perception in every single individual that's having to deal with this change. That will come to bear on all of us, and it is that We are, of course, seeing the layoffs that are happening from companies that have invested heavily in a tool that they thought was going to be more or less just a really simple, tech change, right? An implementation of a tool, and it's so much more than that. Right, the state of threat that everyone's brain, I imagine, is in is got to be just incredibly high. Not just because of layoffs, although that's a very real threat, right? Is that I could lose my job over this. But there's a sometimes maybe more subtle, but just as real threat of like, I'm losing my identity. Like, yes, I have my job. Who am I if I'm not executing on these types of tasks? If I used to work in this way and now I have to work in this way. I've always been a, and then enter, title here. And now I'm being asked to be enter title there. That is an identity change that we don't really take into consideration, and we're not taking into consideration in particular with AI. And it's on the heels also of a global crisis and trauma, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. That, yes, that is over, and we're past, right, the height of that thing. But the trauma, the psychological trauma, the loneliness that we're still experiencing, like how are we supposed to get back to work, the social network that we used to have that we still haven't rebuilt, the literal loss, right, of family members and friends through that thing that we're still grappling with. It's just, we are then putting this industrial revolution on top of unhealed trauma. And if this isn't, electrification, which took 40 years to get across the country. And so you had time, if you wanted to maybe like figure out a new trade, right? As an apprentice under something else. The internet took 15 years to get across this country, more or less. And so we had more time to adapt to that. This is just a few years, right? Like 3-4 years that we've been playing around with this thing. So it is extremely fast when you compare it to other industrial revolutions.
It is so volatile though, and you look at, there's so many things we can talk about when it comes to AI, because I have a lot of conversation with people and corporations and individuals, like you said, they're utilizing these new tools, and they're finding out that these tools, in many cases, there's a steep learning curve. People don't realize that it's no different than take away AI, just Google. You could ask Google something, and you could ask it another way, changing a few words and get a different answer. And you could ask it another way. And I used to always tell people it's the questions you ask individuals and how you're going to get the response you need, right? It's not always what it's how you say things. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Well, it's the same thing when people are utilizing Google in the past and now AI. I was utilizing it yesterday myself. I utilize it every day, but I've noticed a lot of patterns in the last year and a bit with AI. I can tell I can tell a video, I can tell a post, I can tell immediately people that don't train their AI. And what I mean by that is the AIs will put subtle little hyphens in instead of using proper punctuation. They all do it because I have them. I've sampled and utilized and had subscriptions for three of the biggest ones, and I find I can see which ones are continually getting better. They're willing to grow, but I find AI itself has added time in my life, not saved time. Depending on the avenue of how I'm utilizing it, it's made mistakes. And how many people that are listening or watching, have you used AI and you don't even review what you tell it you want, and you just copy and paste, and it's gotten you into trouble? Or you've offended somebody and all of a sudden they're not communicating with you and you don't know why, right? Because you've used it to respond to whatever, not even emails or whatever. I'm not saying it's not a good tool. I'm saying we still have to have us as the fail-safe for a technology that really in many aspects is driven by financial gains and corruption. And I talk about that because of what's gone on with SAM and ChatGPT, like with OpenAI versus I can't remember the name now, the ones that own Claude. And you got, yes, Anthropic. Thank you so much. And then you got Gronk, you got all these different AI systems. And I've literally put the same, copied and pasted the same AI, like same thing in all these AIs, and some of these AIs get cheeky too. will literally insult you, or they'll say, well, I had yesterday, I had a response from Claude that said, well, it's obvious, like literally. And I was just like, excuse me, don't you talk to me like that. And people will say, well, why would you do that? Because if you don't train AI to what you want, it's not going to write like you. It's not going to respond like you. If you tell it to analyze an email and give you a summary or a huge document, you want it to respond to you to where you're going to interpret the data and be able to read it in your head. You're reading this document and it makes sense. And it's not just mechanical. It's not right. People listening, AI isn't that simple. It's got a long way to grow, but just like Sira said, it's only been 2, 3 years, and look where it's already at, right? Taking over everything. How many chatbots right now are just sending out information around the world today in regards to health or politics or whatever, and causing dissension and causing more problems, and they get to sit behind their little keyboard, never to be caught or found, right? But yet the damage of what they're utilizing is stemmed from AI. AI's got no personality, people. Just like money doesn't have personality, it's the people that are wielding that tool and utilizing their power to use it for good or evil, right? No different than any written word of a journalist. Can a journal article be powerful, or can it destroy people, right? When they're writing a newspaper article or a news anchor or whatever, we need to really become more open thinkers. And the way I see this as being an issue is back to that sensitive brain that you talk about. I get people tell me all the time, it's so overwhelming. I don't know how to deal with this in my business. Should I use AI, Dwight, or shouldn't I? And then you have those get down in the rabbit hole conversations, right? So I don't know what you've seen in regards to AI, but obviously you've shared a lot, but what have your clients themselves been saying to you? Like, is it something that keeps them awake at night? Are they afraid it's going to crush their career or their organization or even their business?
Yeah, great question. And there are every fear, concern that you can think of, right, is mentioned. How do I keep up with it? Like, I'm at this point in my career. Do I need to learn this thing? Right? Like, it's just a state of threat for everyone, and it's individual, right? What their concern is, what they're afraid of. And AI has been positioned as something that's going to make jobs or take jobs and bring efficiency, or actually reduce efficiency. It's both things. It's everything. And people are understandably very confused. And I also use AI every day. I think it is and can be a very powerful tool for efficiency, for a kind of first level superficial data processing. But I strongly believe that it should augment rather than replace human judgment and intuition. And that is unfortunately what we are delegating and offloading to the tool is our human judgment, when we're not training it properly, when we're not double checking its responses, and we're letting it make decisions for us. And some like horrific outcomes have occurred from that. People have actually killed themselves, right? Because of what AI has told them about their life and what they should do. It's horrible. The worst case scenarios like have occurred. And so what are we doing about that, right? What are the guardrails? And that is the responsibility of these organizations, and it's the responsibility of those who are in positions of power,
Governance.
governments. Yeah. Yep, right. Who are like, no, we went through a social media AI lack of governance already with Instagram and Twitter and etc. Like, we've already done that, where an algorithm has gotten us all addicted to a thing, and we just zone out and stop thinking for ourselves. Like, we've been here before. We don't have to do it again or as poorly. So I think that
But how do you change that though? We have that AI is so confirmation biased, right? It just like Instagram, and you talk about they didn't do anything about the social media platforms and how they exploded. They're always chasing. They still haven't fixed that issue either, because those algorithms are very unhealthy in how they place information, and they stoke dissent and anger and frustration. And then you add AI into that algorithm, giving fake videos with somebody sitting there that you think that's real, sharing so-called real information that is not even sometimes 5% true. It's just it's really scary. I hear it again from my clients, my family, but I'm here to tell people AI, like Sarah was saying, can be a really helpful tool. But at the end of the day, it's no different than if you hire an assistant. Maybe you have a VA, maybe you have an assistant that actually works with you, right? And they do work for you and they give you information. Do you trust that information that human's giving you all the time? Or do you actually read through what that person's written for you because you're a busy executive and they wrote a speech for you or they did a presentation for you? Are you putting in that energy and time? Well, most likely, if you're a good corporate exec, you are. You are going through it because this is you that you're representing. You go up there and go and something's wrong or whatever. You can't point it to your assistant. Well, it was his or her fault. It's your fault. AI is just like that. I had it generate a document. I give it all the information, the stuff I've been doing for a specific product in our country that I use in financial services, stuff I have been working on, doing myself, copywriting, and I wanted to see what it could do. Oh my gosh, it made it all look fancy and pretty, but it had so much wrong information in there that it's so-called pulled from the internet. And then I started challenging it, and it apologizes to me. It's not human, but yet I'm sorry, right? I should have put more effort in. You're right. That information's incorrect. Here's the right information. It took me 3 prompts to get it to find the right information. You know how it finally found it? I went and I gave it to it, right? But supposedly people are trusting their businesses, their personal lives. I know people that use it as a counselor. I'm here to tell you, don't, right? It's going to give you what it thinks you want so that you don't leave, just like social media. And now you put the two together, and we have a real problem on our hands. One of the things I wanted to lead into this was, you've used the phrase that organizations are still operating from an industrial era metaphor, treating themselves as machines when they're actually living systems. So if an organization is a living system, you throw in social media, which most businesses have, and their staff are utilizing during the day. Don't kid yourself, whether it's on a break or lunch or they're turning, nobody's watching them. They're quickly checking their social posts. I see it from clients that post stuff. They're at work, right? Now they're utilizing AI on top of that to try to help secure their job because they're fearful that it'll replace their job. Like, for every positive that AI has brought to our world, nobody's training people on how to utilize it correctly. And where are the warnings from the government? Why are they not regulating it? Because they're feeding off of it. Look what happened between Claude and ChatGPT and the US government, right? Look at all the stuff that happened in the last few months. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just saying this is going to, if you don't play their game, organizations, if that AI doesn't give them what they want, they'll just go to another one. There's so many of them out there. It's like going into a grocery store and you see 10 different types of cereal. They all look like Cheerios, but some's not a knockoff, some's name brand, right? What are you going to buy? What are you going to utilize? Just be cautious, those that are watching and listening, when you utilize UI, because a business is a living system. It doesn't need to be corrupt more by something that grabs information from millions of databases.
Yeah,
So,
I think
go on.
just on that Anthropic's decision, right? Too, I think that's important. Is that what's interesting about that is that, the government could like choose between one and another, but we do have an example, I think, in Anthropic where the Department of Defense demanded unrestricted AI use, and Anthropic said no, right? And they lost a $200 million contract. But that actually significantly bolstered its reputation as a safety first AI leader, while of course simultaneously creating some short-term commercial and operational risks. But by refusing to allow its model to be used for autonomous weapons or mass surveillance, it really solidified its brand identity as an ethical alternative to competitors. So there are, I think that is, to me, at least, it's a positive, it's a hopeful example of organizations that could could do wrong, go wrong, and despite that gravitational pull, have chosen an intentional ethical path.
Well, and what's the long-term effects of this? So you talked about how companies are getting rid of people or AI is replacing individuals, or companies had such massive they thought that it was going to be so much for them, so they got rid of all the staff. I can see this affecting companies not even a year out, 2 years out that have done this. How do you get that talented staff back now all of a sudden as your numbers drop off because AI wasn't everything you thought it would be? You've replaced a living organism of your organization with human beings, with thoughts, with feelings, with the ability to be articulate, to be able to, you know, empathize. AI can't do that, people. It's all crap that it gives you if it's trying to empathize with you, if it apologizes, if it says this, how's your day? It doesn't care. It's just giving you a robotic response that human individuals want from others. It's not human. And I see the organizations hurting from this more and more so. And you had brought that up. So tell us, what are some of the specific failures that you see besides the fact of loss of talent and obviously potential income or growth for companies?
Yeah, I mean that you've mentioned it around judgment is that abdication, right, is where we then just voluntarily hand over discernment to artificial intelligence, which, as you said, like it doesn't feel, it will not be able to. It may at some point claim that it can, but that's not true. It just isn't. The only thing that can is a human being. And it lacks then that context and empathy, right? It can process patterns, it can optimize a workflow, it cannot read the room, as we say, right? And feel the shift in emotional energy in a team. It will never be able to understand like the why, right? That emotional why behind a decision, because it has none. It cannot feel, right? That energetic transfer has no ability to do that. It doesn't have a nervous system like a human being. So I encourage leaders to use AI to handle, the heavy lifting of repetitive tasks, data analysis. But you've got to keep human judgment firmly in control, especially during critical moments where morale and retention and engagement are most vulnerable. And you mentioned sensitivity a little bit ago, and relevance there, as I talk about, it's that I am a proponent for highly sensitive leaders and those who are wired naturally for that, but we can all nurture what doesn't come naturally. So having that sensitive, emotional, intelligent leadership is that traits like deep processing, empathy, noticing nuances, they are more important than ever before because they allow for human judgment and ethical reasoning that AI cannot mimic. So the winning model is staying human. It's certainly become a buzzword like human-centered leadership or human-centered design. And I think we're going to see now an experience like how true that actually is, that those are not just buzzwords that HR has been saying and talking about. We have to stay human. The future of work isn't just about speed. It's about holding a moral line and using AI to strengthen personal clarity rather than replacing it.
Yeah, I like that, right? We are human. It is not. Use it as a tool, a clarity, an assistant. But I see so many people. I get sent stuff all the time. They're using AI and it's so noticeable. My point for that is I don't necessarily educate people. I will tell people that are really close to me, did you send that? Did you use AI for it? Oh yeah, I was too busy. How do you know it was AI? And I'll tell them exactly how I know it's AI. Number one, I know how you communicate. I've read your stuff. When we read things, we read it based on our 6 inches between our ears, people that are listening or watching. But we develop that connection to that person without even really realizing it until we do realize, like I have, that's not you that wrote that. I know that newsletter, that was not you. Well, I was in a rush. Well, if you're going to use AI, review what it writes. Use it as a tool for data, like you mentioned, Sira, and then make sure it's your voice. You are a brand in yourself, whether you own a business or you're a person working in corporate. You as an individual have a brand, a personal brand of how you represent and show up to people, and you can destroy that overnight with AI. You really can. So quit thinking it can create you more. Utilize that as a tool to enhance what you're doing and just continue on. If it ain't broke, like they say, don't fix it, right? And that doesn't mean you can't add new tools. Like I've found AI to be very powerful, but I've also found so much wrong with it too. Do you think that HR, like you talked about HR departments, do you think that these big companies are they utilizing the conversation in a boardroom? Are they educating their staff about it, or is it just here's a memo, here's this AI, this is what it can, here's the bullet points of what you can do with it, have fun, right? Are they how are companies dealing with AI?
I don't think anyone in human resources is happy about the pace of change, and the push to do things faster despite long-term consequences. Right, that is the department typically, right, who is on the side of the people and saying, I am getting, right, either in my inbox or in my office, or I am feeling it as I'm out in an all staff meeting, in the conversation, etc. Like, people are exhausted. They're seeing it show up in performance reviews and ratings, and what managers are being taxed with. Like, I already couldn't do my job. I was being already asked to do more with less. And now you've just thrown this AI tool, leadership team, right? Ultimate decision makers have said, do this now, and do it fast. And having not realized the gains for an inattention to the reality of change, right? We are typically, I mean, unless you've gone through change management, training, education, like that's your expertise, I can understand, why you're like, this could be easy. It's a tool. It's great. It's going to be awesome. Right. And just like, go do it. But when you've studied human behavior, team dynamics, change management, things always take longer than you think they're going to take. And we're only going to go as fast as our slowest team member. And we need literally every single person on board for us to get even close to the outcomes that we've said that we want to achieve. And organizations don't change, people do. And yet the solutions are applied as if it's some separate entity, right? Something that, well, we just add this layer to our organization and the organization will adopt AI. No, people adopt AI or not. And the reasons are far more complex than what we're addressing. It's training, right? We can throw training as a solution that is super easy. And that's not, to me, really what's at stake. Again, right? It's the identity of that person shifting, being torn apart, the perception of what their future will look like. And that I thought I was going to, do this and that for the next 20 years or so in my career. And now I have no idea what it's going to look like. And the beliefs, right? And again, emotions that all are then churning, right? As a result of those things being threatened.
Well, we as human beings have gut feelings. We have the ability to be in. So again, I don't care who's listening. You can be at a job, you could be in management, you could have your own business. When we are seen as somebody that is a thought leader or somebody that it can help in an organization, and all of a sudden we can look at a circumstance and go, hey, I can remember this in the past. Let's dial this back. I'm going to go look at some documents. I'm going to remember this, and let's put this into perspective. This looks similar. There's similarities. And why I say that is AI doesn't have that ability. Yes, you can utilize it. You can save processes, create templates so that it can remember the next conversation, or it does remember certain things, but it can't remember history, right? Because guess what? It's only been around 2, 3 years. What happens if you're in your job for 15 years, like Sira's talking about? And all of a sudden you're told you can't be you. This is the new you. This is the new norm, right? And I can't even imagine the mental health issues that AI is creating, as you mentioned, for so many individuals, especially with highly sensitive natures, right? With brains. I know myself, I've had to really ask myself, what is the use of this tool? How is it going to affect people? has it helped me? Has it saved me time? In some regards, it's cost me more time because the learning curve of what I want to utilize it for and my ability to want to make sure I protect the end user makes it longer. But not everybody's like me. They're just going to put in what they want, copy paste, and walk away. Right. And that really bothers me because you also talk about, I was just reading in my notes here, you make the case that the traits, and you talked about it, all of a sudden now our deep processing, our empathy, our sensitivity, all this stuff as being, which is a strength, especially in management and organizations that have supervisors, managers. That is a strength. It's not a weakness. Now it's being said that, hey, we can get rid of all that. Now these decisions will be unemotional. Are you kidding me? We need emotion. We need that gut punch. We need that gut check to make sure that we stay on track. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. And there's, I think there's kind of a maybe clarification I want to make, or just a comment on,
Sure.
folks with sensory processing sensitivity, those who consider themselves neurodivergent, and any of the neuro conditions that, are under that header. We are absolutely being taxed by the speed of change, right? In a way that somebody maybe on the lower end of that sensory processing scale, like, may not be as much, in part because we are so sensitive to what is happening, not just inside of us, but also around us and how it's impacting others. We are, seeing friends and family getting laid off. We're seeing the disruption on a team. We're feeling that too. And it can be hard to distinguish between like my experience and your experience, because my this organism, right, has a semi-permeable layer, but it's actually quite permeable, right, relative to others. But what I'm experiencing is that it's not just this group, because of how fast it is happening, because it's on the heels of a global, and right, this pandemic, which was traumatic for everybody, that everybody, right, no matter their neurological wiring, is experiencing the intensity of this change. Because even if you can't pick up on the subtleties in your environment, you're still ultimately suffering when 10% of the workforce or 20% of the workforce gets laid off, and now you're managing, right, a team of 20 before you were managing a team of 5. And that's across the spectrum of neurological function. Like, everyone's suffering. It's just relative.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, well, and you're right, everybody is suffering. Back to what we were talking about in regards to social media and how you have outside influences from other countries, both in the US and Canada, using AI to cause dissension. And even the person that is a normal, it's just somebody that's employed, they're at a job, or they're somebody like my parents that are both 85 that are retired, and they'll bring up stuff because they get into the rabbit hole of watching videos on Facebook or whatever, and all of a sudden that's their new standard of knowledge, or they don't even verify it, not because they're bad individuals, my parents or anybody else out there. They start regurgitating information that there's no basis of verification, and outside forces are hoping for that. So if they're doing it on a government level, I can imagine corporations are doing it against one another as well. Have you seen that as a basis where it's being utilized to hurt companies?
Not that, yeah, not that I have seen.
Well,
No.
that's good, because it's something that I had an individual bring up to me here recently and ask me, how is AI going to make it so that my competitors can take me out or can utilize and do things that I can't do because I'm not really into the technology. I'm just into, this is how I've done business. I
Well,
said,
now,
well,
in that way, yes. I mean, competitive advantage, right? Companies are absolutely going to use whatever tool they possibly can to beat out the competition. It's unfortunate that we have this, like, really, I call it mutant capitalism. It's kind of aggressive individualism, especially here in the United States, with our corporate infrastructure and our culture broadly, just in America. It's like, it's very individual and it's very competitive, and it's you need to compete, you need to crush your enemies, right, in order to succeed. And that's just not the case with the species. Actually, we know that's why we have antitrust laws, is because monopolies actually don't work right for the ecosystem of industry. We need diversity in every location, right, in an ecological system and also in an economy. But that is the message that people receive, and it is the financial kind of, again, pull that founders, organizations have, is that they need to move fast and faster than anybody else, and crush your enemies is kind of the messaging that gets instilled in folks, and as opposed to collaboration and partnership and solving problems from different angles. And even joining forces, right? That as an organization, instead of squashing somebody else, maybe you could start to merge, right, and do this thing together. It's fascinating the way that is shaped up here. Given, again, just the biology of humans, we're the most pro-social species on the planet. We have survived because of our collaborative and cooperative advantage, less so than our competitive advantage. We've got it backwards.
Yeah, I appreciate your response. How does this tie into, though, 'cause being an HR leader yourself, prior, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have a lot of inside knowledge, and I've read stuff that you've talked about in regards to psychological safety and leadership. So what does that look like when you go into an organization, you're talking to somebody, and you might hear people about how they're fearful? How does an HR person, or how does somebody in an authority give that psychological safety to people when they utilize or introduce AI into the equation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the first really conversation that I have to have with leaders is that there is a layer, right, where the issue, say in your transformation, lives, and it could very well be on that interior level that you're not identifying. That we are not addressing this. We are addressing this as a technology change only, and we're addressing the what could be's and selling this as this incredible thing that's going to do all sorts of great stuff for us. And just like with a merger, or an acquisition, with even a funding round, things that are good, you still have to address that somebody is thinking about job security. What does this mean for me? And job security is the first thing that comes up for like any change ever. I went through an M&A with an organization in the past, and the leadership team, executive group is together, and there's like, people are going to get to travel to other countries. We're going to have so many more resources. We're going to blah, 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 blah. And it's like, nobody cares about that. Absolutely nobody cares about that. They want to know if they still have a job and how long they're going to have that job. And is their manager going to change? And what their role and responsibility is going to look like with this change. So that can definitely be in there as like the reason why you ultimately made this decision to sell yourself to this other entity. But don't pretend like people haven't seen, the news with all the mergers and acquisitions that fail and all the slicing and dicing that happens. Like people are smart, right? People read, and there's a legitimate concern for themselves that we do not pay attention to enough. They just assume that like they're here working for the company. It's about the company, and this collective thinking is just assumed, and that's not. Some companies have built a really great, container of psychological safety and this reciprocity that, yes, I give you a wage, but I also know that like you're here because you have a family to take care of, and like that's actually your priority. There are degrees of organizational citizenship, right, where somebody actually is willing to do like whatever it takes for an organization, and the degree to which that exists in a company is directly correlated with how much you've given an employee, right, and how much you are giving back to them, and understand treating them as a human being that has their own priorities. They have their own values, and they are going to live and work and lead in accordance with their values, not yours. It's good to have your values because then you're going to hire people that their values align with your values, right? That is the goal, not that they hold your values. So in any case, that's usually the first kind of like, actually, we need to think about it this way conversation that I have with folks, because we'll talk about it initially from a transition tech transition kind of, tactical prioritization of change management strategy. And we get a little deeper pretty quick and find out that it's not that simple.
Yeah, it isn't that simple. It's just like I go into companies or I deal with people that, you know, they'll go in and I look at their culture because I walk in and I'm not necessarily there on the level that you would be, but I'm in there just as an individual walking into their business. And I look around and you see on the wall a poster or a frame picture. This is our core values. This is what our company deals with. This is what we attest. And I'm looking at it and going, well, about half of those are BS, right? Just because of the company and the people I know within it. And I'm finally experiencing it past the visual or the video calls, and I'm attending their organization, and I'm hearing things and seeing things that aren't really true. So people give lip service all the time on the corporate front. It happens consistently. So with this, what are you seeing? Like, are they giving too much lip service and just expecting the employees to figure it out? What's the solution to this in regards to communication? Like, we can say this is what should happen, but what are you seeing, or what would you adopt in a corporation to say to them? Like, listen, this is how you have to openly communicate about what's happening so that your people feel psychologically, safe. Their priorities of their family, as you mentioned, are always going to be first and foremost. That's something you're going to be concerned about, right? You don't want to create more tension within your staff. They're going to be less productive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the goal that I always have in working with a leadership team and an organization broadly is that it needs to become adaptive. So whether it's AI change, although that is absolutely the focus right now, and it's the hot topic, and for good reason, any kind of transformation requires diagnosing across multiple dimensions, leading across multiple levels in order to drive change that lasts. And my thesis, right, in my business is that organizations are living systems and they form a collective nervous system, and leadership determines whether the system functions or fractures under pressure. And AI is that, massive pressure that, a lot of organizations are experiencing right now. And so the outcome of that endeavor is adaptive human systems that can sense, decide, and evolve so that people aren't fighting change, right? That they could perhaps even flourish, right, in it, so long as the conditions, right, are created for that to happen. And when I say dimensions, every issue lives somewhere across 4 dimensions. And I look at the whole system. I diagnose the whole system, not just maybe the obvious part. Our AI adoption isn't working. We're still in experimentation mode. Like, let's assign training. That may not be the answer. Training isn't always the answer. The dimensions are based on Ken Wilber's integral model. So there's an interior layer and an individual layer, and that's where identity, perception, beliefs, and emotions exist. There's an interior, and that's all subjective, right? That's individual. Each of us is going to have a slightly different view, right, and sense of like what's going on. And then there's an interior but collective level, which is the culture and trust and meaning and relationships, and that's where psychological safety, right, exists, and how you're building that. And the exterior layer is, behave, and exterior individual, that is behavior and the skills that you have and habits and workload. That's where that stuff lives. And then finally, exterior collective, which is systems and structure and processes and resources. So all 4 of those dimensions are something that we look at, and we find where the biggest constraint is. That's another kind of back end feature of my work, is that I employ the theory of constraints, which is there's always one constraint, and we need to focus the entire system right around eliminating that highest priority constraint before moving on to a next one, because usually that constraint will solve a lot of related and smaller constraints. The levels that I mentioned is the leadership levels: leading self, leading others, leading leaders, which is cross-functional leadership, and then leading the enterprise. And self-leadership, that leading self layer, is the foundation across all levels of leadership, right? We are all leading ourselves, whether we ever have a formal leadership role. We must lead ourselves. And every breakdown at a higher level has a self-leadership component. So how are we getting in our own way? What haven't we addressed internally, either on this interior individual level or this interior collective level?
And all our personal stuff comes into play. All our learned behaviors through right from back to our origin to where we are, to if you've been in more than one organization and you've been given lip service and not really protected on a psychological level, just made to feel like you're a digit or a number, go in, do your job, leave. We don't need anything more from you. And then you top off all that now with AI. I can imagine, I don't know the statistics, but the mental health and emotional health of people around North America, not just like Canada, US, but Europe, etc., it's super fragile right now. And it kind of makes me extremely nervous as to the health implications. Like, as you mentioned, way past in the conversation about people, killing themselves over some of this stuff. I can see this because you segued perfectly. COVID-19 may be over, but is it really over on the emotional and mental stress of what it's caused in organizations? People working from home now being told they can't work at home anymore, when really a lot of people that I deal with are more efficient working. They were more efficient. They got more work done because they didn't have all the false wall jungle, all the communication from other people chattering or knocking on there if they have an actual office, disrupting them, right? So it is a very big concern for me, and I don't believe that people are going to be able to adapt quick enough to keep up to it, right? So you being a person that specializes in understanding an organization as a living entity, your talents and I can see it in a very short period of time. If you already aren't, you're going to be so busy because people are just going to, bosses are going to throw up their arms and go, I don't know what's going on. Our numbers are down this quarter. Our numbers are down this half. We didn't do much. Well, yeah, you did. You threw a monkey wrench called AI into your system, and you didn't understand how it was going to affect the emotional and psychological factors of your staff. So, I'm not trying to make this a doom and gloom for those watching or listening. I want you to wake up and realize that it is a tool. It is, and that where you're at, maybe some of the things Sira and I have been talking about will actually wake you up to realize that an organization, because I never really thought about it until you and I met this last time and recorded, and I did all the research about you. What you say is so true. We don't look at an organization as being a living organism, and we should. We should, because every single person within that organization, from the top of the house of cards all the way to the bottom, is a human being. They want to know that they're appreciated. They want to know that their work is valued. Oh, you're cut back. You can go do this other task for us now. We're going to let AI take care of that, right? We're going to so-called promote you. People don't take it that way, do they?
Mm-mm. And survivor's guilt is a very real phenomenon that folks who remain in an organization feel, are like, why am I here? Why isn't my boss here anymore? Like, I thought they were great. I really helped, like they helped me. Right. They were all of the things. So, and you were wondering, or you mentioned about the stats. I have a stat on my website from recent research that the burnout industry is $322 billion.
Goodness, I missed that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's an industry itself, right? I mean, that's an, so, and yet those stats exist. It reminds me of, I mean, just any stats that existed on diversity and how important it was to have, to have gender parity on a leadership team, to have diversity in any layer, any flavor, right, inside of your organization, for creativity and innovative thinking, for critical thinking, for viewing different perspectives, right, for empathy, emotional intelligence, for creating products that actually serve, right, your diverse clientele in the best way possible. And yet we don't act on those things. And yet we squash that, right? Now we're in this, multiple steps back on DEI and ESG, and leadership matters, right? We can see in the United States, like, what that is doing, right? We get set back when we don't have leaders who prioritize what matters.
Yeah, they're prioritizing their own singular, because really it's not in depth, their own singular thought process, and projecting it on everybody else. So you add all of that up, and then you look at the local leaders of companies. We are at a point in history where it literally, we can define ourselves as a generation or generations that can continue to adapt based on the human condition, that we want to work with one another, we want to have stronger relationships, we want to understand what's going on with that person at home, right? Instead of looking at, oh, their production's kind of off, we're just going to replace them, or we're going to move them to another department. Then, like you said, people feel sabotage, they feel like they're not worthy, they're not appreciated. So we'll continue on with the last part of our conversation, but those listening or watching, reach out to Sira. Like, if you have any comments that you want to share with her and ask her questions. This is a real problem that's going on, and we have very few people, at least from there's probably more than I realize, but that are open enough to put themselves out there, because I guarantee this can be taxing on Sira. But at the end of the day, she's willing to put her emotions, her heart on her sleeve. She's willing to put herself out there to criticism, realizing that we have I'm going to call it what it is, old boys club that has been running our countries, our corporations for far too long. And it's all based on numbers of what do we produce this quarter? Not looking at what caused us not to produce enough this quarter, blaming everybody but themselves for not really staying in contact with the human condition and the people that they work with. So where do you see from this point in your career moving forward? How is the best way is this a marketing thing that you're going to have to do to reach out to companies, or is it just naturally happening that companies are looking for solutions for their lack of production or employee burnout?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there've been some helpful, interesting, like, white papers produced by, like, McKinsey, like the state of organizations, just at the top of 2026. So that have articulated that, the companies, the leaders that focus on the human side of change are going to dominate the next decade. I think this is like one of the titles or subtitles of one of these papers, and they were all essentially saying the same thing. And what I had to laugh a little bit about that is that, like, even these organizations who, they rush to adopt this thing, are leading other organizations at very high prices through change, still fell into the same traps, right, that everyone else was, and just, like, doing it way too fast and just throwing it into people's hands and wanting them to figure it out, are not realizing the gains, right? Lots of now data being reported that companies are not on the whole, right? Like, the grand majority of organizations not realizing the gains of their AI implementations for the lack of attention to the human side of change. That ultimately the pain, right, of, you can lay people off, right? When you don't realize the gains, right, or you think you're doing this preemptively, but you've invested in a thing, you're like, oh, well, I think it's going to, allow us to, like, reduce 10% of our staff, so let's just go ahead and do that. Or, right, you're not realizing the gains and you're starting to panic, and you're going, like, finance is saying, like, we got to make a call here. And then you dump some of your teammates for that reason. That at some point, right, you don't have the people to actually do the thing. They don't know how to do the thing. The pain will be so great that your back is against a wall, and you're like, okay, I guess we'll pay attention to the people. right? I guess we'll hire someone to help us with this. Maybe we'll hire some of those people back that we let go. But at some point, yeah, the call comes around that we don't have the answers. We over-indexed on this thing, and we need help righting the ship. People aren't happy. People aren't just unhappy. They are actively disengaged. And we're starting to see that in our numbers in a way that we can't solve for. We need help. So that's a part of human nature, right? To a high degree. It's like we're really good at, we're really good at solving problems or making decisions when our back's against a wall. So unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of pain before finally, right, leaders say, okay, my back's against a wall. I don't know how to solve this problem. No one around me knows how to solve this problem. I got to bring somebody in. And I'm brought in those cases, right, to solve that.
Hopefully it's not too late.
And hopefully it's not too late. And in other cases, there are people who like me, have track records inside organizations trying to optimize existing systems, and we're literally sick and tired, right, from doing that and of doing that, and of suffering just chronic institutional betrayal, that we've chosen to do something differently. And we're looking for, the signal and the noise and finding other people like us, and I use different tools to find more aligned people. But I just have been reaching out, of course, to people in my network, right? The people who I worked with extensively, the service providers and vendors and just collaboration partners, and saying, this is what I'm doing now. Do you know someone who is not trying to optimize an existing system, but is actually paradigm shifting, right? That they're building companies, or trying to build companies that don't collapse under pressure by strengthening how they think, decide, and lead. I'm interested in, and have been talking more with, like, the 0 to 1 founder, right? Like strengthening that early leadership foundation. So those early, decisions are high impact, not just near term, but long term. Right. So 0 to 1 founders or small teams who want that expert guidance early without, the full-time commitment of a strategic advisory partnership. But that's then kind of my typical model, is like founders or executives in growth mode who need a strategic partner to help them scale with clarity, not chaos, and who isn't motivated by the financial payout. I talked with a founder who's on his second startup, and that was a part of our initial conversation. It's like, I'm having a really hard time finding a strategic partner who isn't motivated by the money. I'm like, yeah, like, let's keep talking about what I've done and how I think and how I've made decisions, until the point that you feel comfortable, right, with me, and that we've found enough alignment, right, to say, like, yes to each other. Like, we can take as much time as you want. But that was clear, right, that there are people who want to build things differently, and there are vampires all around us who just want to suck out whatever
all our
they
energy. Yeah, all our energy and resources. Kind of scary, though, when I think about what you talked about earlier about COVID-19, and we've talked about how it's over in some regards, but how is it really? And I look at all the companies that have been around for years, even after the pandemics ended, that are starting to collapse, that are pointing right back at the pandemic. And I see that timeline. The reason for this question is that timeline going to be even shorter when it comes to the implementation of AI and what it does? You talked about the 0 to 1 person. That person, I could see, if they started structuring it correctly and utilize your services, they will take over their competitors. They may start out initially nervous and, oh my gosh, but if they can stay ahead of the curve and not be rolled over by the wave, that 0 to 1 person is going to be so much stronger, are they not?
Yes. And that is the FedMart model, who really served as like the example of what organization a CEO founder, right, can do to protect the company from again, like the financial gravitational pull, and how Costco then came to be when that board for that CEO founder eventually did just cut him off. And then the company was gone in like 18 months. But that CEO founder, and I think a senior leader of that FedMart executive team, then founded Costco. And we know how amazing Costco is, right? Like its governance is for longevity and for corporate responsibility. And we've got Patagonia too, that has even transcended the like for-profit, nonprofit spheres, like as if, they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can do good and still make money. Or the benefit corporations, right, that have it built into their taxonomy, that they have a responsibility not just to shareholders, but to their employees and their customers and the environment. So it absolutely is possible. There are examples of organizations that have done this, and they are living right to like the 50 and even 100-year mark because they've been designed right that way intentionally from the beginning.
And this was before AI. Like you brought up Costco.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of that, but I have read up a lot on Costco, and I know a lot of people that have. I know one lady that I've known for 30 some years, and she's worked at Costco. She started as just, stocking and then worked at the tills. And now she's in one of the management supervisors, and she brags about how great they teach, or pardon me, the culture is, and how they treat them properly and they get paid accordingly, and they don't feel, because I've asked some of them, like, you never thought of going anywhere else? Because I have clients that work for them as well. No, why would we? To go to somewhere to make a little bit more money, to have what? We don't know the culture, or we get told what it's going to be like, but here I know what it's like. I've been living it. And I didn't realize that, even yourself would think of Costco as somebody that is very forward thinking. I know, like I said, just conversations and stuff I've read, I've thought, my goodness, I didn't realize how forward thinking this company is. So really, AI isn't going to hurt them on a service basis. They probably will enhance some of their analytics of data, but there, why aren't more companies like Costco? Like I don't know if you have the answer, but why? I look at people that work for Walmart and complain about it constantly in Canada, right? I look at people that work for other organizations, and we'll get into all their names, but they'll tell me, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it wasn't set up correctly, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do have an opinion on this, and it's part of my
Sure.
of research, in neuroscience and human behavior and systems thinking and, philosophy and just a whole lot of disciplines that, maybe understand that, the container, right? The environment has so much to do with the choices that we make, that we entered this world with, part of our personality because that's genetic. And then that's about 50%. That's like right chance that you've got half and half is what we know to date about how personality forms. And so our earliest messages, right? Like what did our parents do for a living, and where were they working, and what were the messages they were sending us to our educational system, and then our friends and those early social networks and their parents, and then our communities, and then our countries, and what that environment is reinforcing. And depending on all of those factors, right, the pressure to go a certain way, the predefined path is so strong. And the financial, I call them the financial like gravitational pulls to like move fast and break things, and to prioritize self over other, as opposed to an integrative negotiation with both, that you can have both, right? Like that is not being taught broadly, right? Widely, in mainstream. Again, especially where I am, right, in the United States in particular, and not in Silicon Valley with the VCs and the PEs, and in that monetary model of you need to move as fast as you can to make as much as you can so you can make money for me, right? So that environment is difficult for any individual to break from when that's all that you're receiving all day long since forever. But we also have neuroplasticity, and we also do have the freedom of choice, and we can choose to do something differently. I take people through though to be able to do that and not become completely ungrounded, right, and then just revert back, right, to something that's known or feels safer. I take them through a process called Align, where we go through and those dimensions too, right, and we discover like what messages did you receive, and how did that form your identity, right? And what are these different parts of you that are telling you that you have to do it this way, or what? Or like, what is the fear? What is underneath that? And to get at those perceptions and those beliefs, to then be able to look at it plainly without judgment, without initially trying to change anything. Like, we just want to assess completely, right, this internal operating system and why we might be, inclined to make certain decisions and why we have, to then move to, well, how do we liberate, right? How do we let go? I think, again, the framework AL, how do we let go of some of these beliefs, some of these perceptions, some part of our identity? And then integrate is, how do we then bring something new in? Because the brain does not like to just let go of something without replacing it. It tends to freak out. So what are we replacing it with, right? Whether it's a habit, right? Let's replace it with a better coping mechanism, or a new way of thinking about this thing or about ourselves. And then what are our self-regulation techniques in ground, right? How are we staying connected, right, to these decisions that we've made for ourselves and the practices we have, that when that vampire comes around, or when the environment that you're in, the context, right, tells you that thing that you don't want to do anymore, right? How are you staying connected? And that is all about navigating in alignment with your purpose, right? Your mission, your values. And that we repeat that, right? You align all throughout the day and all throughout your life. So that's the process that I work through for folks to help protect.
I love that. I love that, because you talk about our purpose and the alignment principles and practices that you've created to help people. And to me, like, you want to figure out what makes people tick. And it goes back for me in my industry, in my career, coaching people always goes back to, okay, you told me all your problems, your numbers and all this issues. Let's talk about your other monsters in your life. What do you mean? What about your life monsters? What happened when you were growing up? What happened at this last job you were at for 8 years? What made you decide to leave? Trying to get down to the core of what is holding them there, what is holding them back, what's holding, from leaving or to change their company if they're one of the main key holders. And I just find there's a lot of commonality between what you and I are talking about. People don't give enough attention to their past, right? And that past could be a month ago. It doesn't even have to be a lifetime ago, right? People listening, it can be a month ago that you had something that is affecting you today, and you didn't give it enough attention back then because you were never wired to understand, right, the living organism of an organization, or where you fit within it, right? And then, as you mentioned, you have the leaders that are just talking about money. They don't care. As a house of cards that they have, if a few of the cards fall down at the bottom, they're just pushing somebody else in there to hold it up. They're right, and they lose good talent because now they're still getting good numbers, but eventually I see a lot of companies that are going to collapse, big name companies, right? Look at the fall of, and this isn't necessarily AI related, but look at the fall of Sears, right?
Mhm.
Look at the fall of all these different businesses that have gone to the wayside. Look at in Canada, one of the oldest corporations in the world as a running business, the Hudson Bay Company, is no longer. Why? They kept their culture the same, right? Trickle down effect, just enough to keep the house of cards from collapsing, but not enough to really care or to humanize their business as a living organism. So what you're talking about, I think, my gosh, if some of these companies could have had somebody like you teaching them, or even if it had even existed back then, but thank goodness there's people like you out there. There's going to be enough 0 to 1 people and enough current organizations that will be saved because you're able to make them think outside the box.
That is the goal. Yeah. Is that it's also why I've always really liked working with emerging leaders internally in my internal roles, is that I really loved developing the up and comers, because the plasticity, right, is greater. For all of us, as we get older, we tend to get, a little solidified in our ways, and we're more resistant to influence. And there's also data on this, that the more we ascend in formal leadership roles, the less empathetic we become. We start to think that we got here because of just us, right? Just ourselves and our own hard work and what we sacrificed, et cetera, to get there. And we forget like how many other people contributed to our success. But you can, even though that is a tendency, it's self-awareness, right? Is the crux of the matter. It's like you can develop self-awareness around these things and educate yourself. Like you can absolutely protect yourself from these contextual environmental headwinds that are going to challenge you to do something differently than the default path. But it is possible.
Absolutely. Self-awareness is something I coach and talk about all the time. And those that talk, hopefully you're doing the walk, right? If you're telling people do all this stuff, hopefully you can prove through your actions, not just your words, because the form of leadership where people say, do what I say, not what I do, that's dead. That's like raising our children that way. That didn't work either, and it backfires on you. So if you raise a culture of your human living organism that way, and then you throw in even more things, like my gosh, I can't even imagine how the psychological industry with psychologists and psychiatrists, how the burden is on them, and how there's not enough people out there that are helping with mental health challenges that are stemmed right from their learned behaviors from their life, which they took into their organizations. They feel like a place card. They don't really feel like they're wanted or listened to. And I pray for people that you have that self-awareness. Where are you at in your career? Where are you at in your job? If you're a boss, do you look around? Do you notice human behavior? Do you look at the psychological, what people are talking about? Do you look how they walk? Are they slumped over? And people say, well, why do you worry about that? Because the human condition is something we should all strive to understand. Because the more we understand Sira and how she's reacting, her responses, her body language, is she leaning forward? Is she crossing her arms? The better relationship we have. The stronger the organizational chemistry and the structure is. And, work on that, being self-aware. Now that you have the AI portion that we've been talking about and the self-aware, be self-aware of that. How is it affecting you? Are you courageous enough to go talk to your boss above you? Hey, this is what I'm seeing. Don't be knee-jerk about it. Use self-awareness on yourself and then start being self-aware about those around you. What have you done that's created some of that? What could you do better? Who can you communicate with? You have nobody? Oh, guess what? Sira has a website that you can go to, right? leadnorthofnormal.com. Go check it out, right? I highly recommend it. It may seem like it's all over the place, but there's even more things that we could discuss. But thank you again for coming on. I'm going to ask you one last question, and the value that you've given me from first episode to this episode, just getting to know you, for me is really invaluable because it'll help me communicate better with the corporations, with the companies, with the individuals that I deal with that work within these companies. I constantly am self-aware that I need to grow. I need to continue to learn. I need to stay ahead of that wave instead of getting crushed by it. And people like you, I'm grateful for. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So the last question, we never did this in the first episode because the timing and everything was just so abrupt. So I apologize for that. But I ask everybody this question in my episodes. If you could leave one message with a leader listening right now who is quietly doubting whether they are built for this, who keeps trying to lead like everyone else and wondering why it is costing them so much, what would you want them to hear?
I would want everyone to trust themselves more. I think self-trust is highly underrated, not talked about enough, not understood, that you do have a kind of knowing inside of you, because there's so much information from our experience that's just automatically sent to the subconscious. So we're working really with this much information with our logical mind, but your nervous system is just picking up on so much more. that's where that intuition, gut feeling, right? Like I just sense something else, and like you may not be able to have a logical explanation for that yet, but to trust that instinct and follow it, right? By asking questions like of yourself, doing research, like just exploring that more. That's part of the process for developing self-trust, which is necessary for valuing yourself enough to know that you can make decisions that are different from the default path, whatever you've been taught. That is something I've learned. I've developed it. I've certainly fallen flat on my face and then picked myself back up again. Right? It's a process. It never ends. But that's what I would leave leaders with, is that self-trust, cultivating that, and that is what then increases your consciousness and your ability to wield the natural gifts that you have, but then everything you learn throughout your life as the best leader you could be.
Wow, what a great final message. Thank you for sharing that. So across both of these conversations, what strikes me the most is that you've not been asking people to become something they are not. You've been asking them to stop pretending to be something they were never designed to be in the first place. That is fundamentally different conversation that most leadership development offers. And I think it is one that is long overdue for people to hear. And again, I thank you for these two fabulous episodes and all the knowledge you've shared. It's only scraping the surface of obviously what you can help people with, and hopefully it's enough to create that self-awareness, that questioning. Right? Don't question yourself, but do something. Don't stew in it. Take some action. Is there any last words that you'd like to share, or to wrap up the show before I say my last stuff?
Yeah, I mean, in short, stay human.
Love it. Love it. We should all have that as little stickers or posters, right? Right on the wall, right? And I tell people all the time, if you do stuff like that, you're worthy. Some people have it, and after a while, they're visually blind. They don't see it anymore on their door going out to their garage or whatever, or their outside door to their backyard. Move stuff around, right? Utilize little things like that. It may seem cheesy, but hey, if cheesy works, cheesy works. Do it, right? Call it whatever. People can call it whatever you want. I call it on keeping that self-awareness switch turned on and never
Yeah,
shutting it off, right? So do those little things. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. I look forward to further conversations in the future.
absolutely. Thank you.
So, for everyone listening across both parts, if any of this felt like it was describing you, that recognition is worth paying attention to. The way your brain works is not a problem to fix. It may be exactly what people around you need most once you understand how to utilize it. Sira offers a free chemistry call through her website, which I mentioned earlier, leadnorthofnormal.com. No pressure, no obligation, just a real conversation about where you are and how she might help. That is a worthwhile step, right? Take that first baby step. Never sit back and think, I can't change, right? I believe we can change till the day we take our last breath. And that is how I'm living my life. And I believe Sira is as well. So, you know, is there any other way people should reach out to you besides your website that I've given? I should ask that one last question.
I'm on a number of other channels:
Sure.
YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram. North of Normal by Sira Laurel.
And for those new to the Give a Heck podcast, go to giveaheck.com, go to the top, hit podcast. You will see very detailed show notes that I do for my guests, which will show all their social media and literally one-stop shop. So you don't have to pull over and be writing stuff down. Just go check out the website. And if you're that type of person that's nervous, because I don't do know leaders like that, and you're nervous about wanting to reach out to Sira, reach out to me. I'll help you make a connection, right? Don't sit and wonder anymore if there's a possibility of change in your life, in your organization's life, right? It is out there. So, to our listeners and viewers, thank you. We do not take your time lightly. We appreciate your investment to want to change and grow. If this two-part conversation resonated with you, please share it. When you share an episode, it helps this message reach more people so they too can give a heck and live with purpose and intention. Please subscribe to the Give a Heck podcast in your favorite platform and leave a comment or a review. Again, it helps with the algorithms, make it so that more people see it, especially this great information that Sira has given us. Until next time, live life on purpose and not by accident. And remember, it's never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.